Hello, everybody. Good
Hello.
morning. How's everyone today?
Or afternoon or evening, wherever you are.
Oh, good point. It's morning here. I'm still in first cup of coffee. Welcome back to Boho Rune Study Group. I am Lisa. This is the beautiful, this way.
I'm over here.
Darn it. I get my fingers. Dawn Michelle of Boho Tarot. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Does everybody have a beverage or a snack or a notebook or their pile of rune goodies or something?
All of the above.
Mm-hmm. I have a big pile of stuff. Last week, I couldn't find my rune cards during the one portion of the video, and I got up when I was done, and it was like beside me, like it had fallen into the couch cushions.
That figure.
Found it after. This time, I have things in a neater pile.
Nice.
We have a bunch of people in here with us. So we have Anne and Cillian. Hi, Regina. Oh boy, I'm not going to do that one right. Regina. Regina. Oh, probably Regina.
Probably Regina.
Good Journey, Tarot and Liz. And hello. There are
everyone.
I have the chat up, which is great. So this is our second live stream where we're talking about the runes, but the third live stream overall.
Yeah, just to make it confusing.
I love it though. It's awesome. My wife is still waking up. You can hear her in the background.
Yeah.
She's officially on first cup of coffee. I am on second cup of coffee. She says hi.
Hello.
So today we're going to be, I guess, just chatting about how the last couple weeks have gone. How did they go for you?
I feel like this section, I feel like went a little bit better. Like I was able to stay a little bit more on track, I guess. Just, I don't know. I read in a book, I think it was Taking Up the Runes, that like once you get past the first 8, it gets easier and it gets quicker. And I've totally found that.
Yeah, I agree. I found that like definitely the first one, I almost felt intimidated by the process. So like once it's like almost like procrastinating, like, I don't know, can I dive in? And then I felt like I did a whole lot in a short period of time. This time felt like, yeah, I agree. It felt like it flowed better. And I also felt like the runes that came up that were tricky for me to unpack, it felt more exciting and fun, I guess, the second week than maybe the first week, which is interesting. And there's a lot of like big dynamic energies in the second group of 8.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, for sure.
Have you been doing any like polls alongside like the study at this point, or are you still just kind of diving through?
I'm still just really diving through. I put my little runes in a bag like a ways so that I wouldn't be tempted to kind of like jump ahead, because I'm trying to stay on track, not only with the group, but in terms of what the resources we're trying to gather for the group. So I'm kind of working ahead, but not, and it's already like, I'm like, I can't do casting in the middle of all of that. I'll just totally lose my focus.
I haven't tried any castings, but I have been trying to pull a rune a day, but that's been a part of my practice for a while now.
Right.
It's interesting to me because I'm doing daily pulls now and they're feeling a lot different, which I guess that makes sense, but they're feeling a lot different than they did before we started the study, because I was just sort of taking them at their, I think I've talked about this a little bit last week, but sort of taking the runes at their sort of punchy top level meaning. Yeah. And I feel like now the biggest problem I'm having is that I am carting around with me several books everywhere I go, because I often will do my rune draws like when I get to work, or I'll do them on a break or whatever. And so then I've got like all these different books on hand, and I'm at the point now where I need to look them up in all of the books, because I recognize that they're all completely different. So I'm like, I need to reference them all. It's not like I can just take one book and call it done. No. Every time I do a daily draw now, I have to look it up in all these different spots.
Yeah, I'm doing the same, just kind of trying to, sort through all the information, and then, going to the group and then grabbing little snippets from there, because everybody has different resources, which was really the whole point. Let's share resources. And so that's been really interesting. But I think, like you, I kind of had a sort of preconceived notion in my first pass of everything and putting together the materials. Okay, this means this and this means this. But like, it's just really not that cut and dry. And
no.
it like spans the whole, like from the, you know, these huge big ideas to like the little everyday things. And you're like, oh, that's just a whole rainbow of things in between.
It is. I feel like, and I might have already said this, but I'm going to say it again because I think it bears repeating. I'm kind of laughing at myself a little because when we started this series, I was like, oh, it'd be cool to like match a rune to a card. And I've learned as we've studied them that there is, I don't know how I would do that. There might still be ways, but like I feel like each rune would be like a handful of cards at minimum. And I feel like they when you said in the beginning that you felt more intimidated in a way by trying to study the 24 runes than the 78 tarot cards, I was like, oh, it'll be fine. And then as I go in, I'm like, no, you're right. Because there's definitely at least 78 tarot cards worth of information packed in to 24 runes.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is. It's a lot. And there's so, like, every reference material you pull has a different idea.
Yeah.
So it's like it can make it really confusing because you're, you know, trying to pull, and sometimes they contradict each other. So I'm thinking that context, like for me, context in tarot is hugely important when I do a reading, but I think in runes it might be even more so because I think context is really going to play a huge part in how you actually interpret the runes. Because like, I mean, as we know from tarot, like just studying a card is different from actually reading a card in a position.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I feel like the runes are going to be the same way.
Good Journeys Tarot says, I've been taking out the 4 for the week and putting the others away, which I think is so smart. I'm resisting the urge to draw until we're through the last ayat. I cannot ever decide how to say that. I've been calling it et, then I've heard it kind of pronounced 8, so now I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
The pronunciations in general are a little tricky. But somebody posted in the rune group this past week a chant of all the runes. Have you watched that yet?
I haven't. It's on my little list to do, but
yeah, I added it too. If you need help finding it, I added it to the unit on rune pronunciation so that it's easy to find it. But it's really cool to listen to because you can. I mean, they're said very quickly and in quick succession or whatever. But it's really cool to hear them pronounced that way. It's like, oh, okay. It for some reason that's been easier for me to digest than the rune pronunciation video that's also in that unit that we saved. But yeah, I don't know, that was a random sidetrack. But I like the idea of pulling out the 4 runes and just having them available.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's kind of why I sort of put my runes away, just because so I wouldn't sort of jump ahead. Because putting together, you know, the materials, I'm kind of like in 2 ets at one time.
Yeah.
There's material for the next, but then I'm studying this one and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, okay, which one was that in? Because I was making some notes and I'm like, oh, that's totally the wrong rune.
I have to say I appreciate you so much because I feel like that's hard. You've got 1 foot, you're like temperance, right? You got 1 foot in the next one, 1 foot in this one, and then you're trying to keep it all straight while you're actively studying, which is great.
Yeah,
so there's like, doing that.
There's another rune in the third, which we're going to be doing next week, in the third et that is very closely related to Sawilo. I'm trying to think. Oh. The sun.
Yeah.
So they're kind of closely related, and so I've been having to like catch myself to not mix the 2 up. Yeah.
Oh man, you're gonna probably need like a time of sort of, I guess, unpacking from the study group just to kind of clear your head and be able to focus maybe a bit better.
Yeah.
But I will say it's been really exciting to me to see the different tidbits that get, and I say this every time, but it's so true. Like one of the first things I do when the new post pops up for the room we're studying that day is I check and see what other people have said. I add a few videos, some of the favorite videos that have come through, some of the creators that do have a video on each rune. There's 3 that we're putting in right now. Nina's short rune meaning series, Aerith Hagar's rune meaning, I think is his name. And then there's one other, I can't remember the name, but I can picture it in my head. That has a short video too. So I always pop those in, or one of the group members, Rosemary, gets ahead of me, which thank you so much, by the way, for popping those in when I get behind. But I always watch those. I always read other people's comments, and then I go to my books. And it's been a neat kind of combo to watch, read, and then do my own study. Yes, Wayfarers. Thank you, Good Journeys Tarot. So putting all those together has been so helpful.
Yeah, that's been really, really interesting. So I've been doing the kind of like the book study, the initial, then in one book. Then I go to the group and I see what's there, and then I go to another book and then read that, and then after I kind of take all of that, and then I do my own, and then I go back to the group and pop that in. But
Yeah.
it's just because there are so many different, and I think we've said this before, sometimes when somebody says something in the group, it like clicks so much better than reading it in a
So
book.
true.
I totally read that, but that makes sense now.
Yeah, I love that. I love because it's kind of like one of my favorite hobbies is to give Peggy something to read and then have her just re-explain it to me after. Because I feel like sometimes when you take something in just from the written word and it definitely lands differently when other people say it in their own words. Like basically exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Tammy Pie says, I'm terrible at homework. I'm totally behind. I think we've learned throughout this process that this is a good pacing for getting the information out there. And then I'm really loving the units thing. I discovered that tip in the Facebook group. The units, if you mark each post that you read through or go through as done, then when you go back into the group, it's like, oh, continue here. And it like bookmarks your spot for you. And as soon as I found that, I was like, oh, that's amazing. I don't have to keep track in my head. It's going to keep track for me.
Yeah.
You can kind of go through at your own pace. We've had some people message or like reach out who have basically said that like they're not going to be able to join for a bit. And I think it's nice to know that you can still continue just flowing through at your own pace whenever you join.
I'm fully intending on going back to the beginning probably when we're done, just to, add more, catch up, see what else, because people you are still adding things to each of even the runes that we've already covered, because like you said, it's just kind of this big push to get it out there, because if we did it really slow, the time that it would probably actually take, we'd be here till like 2024.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, definitely in a couple years, because yeah, it'll be fun to keep dipping back in. I'm really enjoying that, and I've just started reading that Neil Gaiman book, Norse mythology, and I'm really excited because while I kind of wish I'd read it before, it's like peeling back more layers as I'm starting to read it and attaching it to some of the things we've already covered in the runes. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, I've been connecting, particularly with because the three Eds are connected to 3 different gods. So each time we go through one, like the next one is Tyr. So I've gone back to my Norse mythology book and kind of reread. He doesn't really have so much a story of his own, but like his kind of key moments, I've kind of gone back and read those just to kind of familiarize myself with that god. Although I don't know how much it actually relates to the runes, to be perfectly honest, but it's a great way to categorize them. And I think the gods do a little bit kind of tie into maybe the overall energy, but I was really trying to like find where's the thread, right? Why are these 8 runes connected to this particular god?
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Anne says, so is the idea of the rune meanings to read several sources and then come up with what resonates? I think so. Like what I've been finding is that there's not, as Don Michelle already mentioned, there's not a lot of cohesion necessarily in each rune from different sources. And as I've done more study, one of the things I've noticed is that we only know so much, right? So much of the language and so much of the original meanings of the runes has ultimately not survived very well. So we're just trying to piece together what we can. And so I think just like with tarot, you start with sort of people who I think are well versed, I guess, in the system, and like learn or expose yourself to those different takes. And then for me anyways, it's also about distilling it down and going, what stands out to me? Like what feels really resonant for me so that I can roll with that. Because that's what I do with tarot too. It's like, this is the meanings. And then that becomes a foundation that you then build your own structure of an idea around.
Your own.
And like for you, Dawn.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think that even with tarot, there's 20 different interpretations for one card. It depends on who you ask. It depends on what system. And the thing with runes too is it varies too, because we have to remember it was like a language. So just like our language changes, so to have the runes. So depending on what resources you're reading and what sort of area or time frame that they're looking at, it can change because it fluctuates. And I think that a lot of times I found that in some of my resources, some of the things that we now today would associate with a rune is not necessarily something that would have been an association a long time ago, because
of course,
this or our understanding is different now. you know, our whole world view is different from when the runes were originally in use as kind of like a language and an alphabet.
Yeah.
I think it's, yeah, take what works for you and dump the rest. That's what I always say.
That's my philosophy too. Liz Haas asks, how can I be a part of the group of runes? So the study group itself, we're doing these lives here on YouTube so that everybody can participate, but those who have access to Facebook can join the Rune Study Facebook group, the Boho Rune Study Facebook group. There's a link for that down below. All you have to do is let us know how you found out about it, usually from somewhere on YouTube or from one of our groups or whatever, and then that you accept the rules and we let you in. And all of the runes that we've studied so far, everything coming up is all grouped into the units section. So if you click units, you can move through from the beginning if you want, or you can just click around, view, participate as you like, whatever you want to do. And there was another question I thought I spotted in here too. Here we go. Griffin. Oh, did I lose it? Yeah, here it is. Is there a runic compendium as can be found in the study of tarot? You want to field that one, Dawn Michelle?
Not really. That was kind of why I was like, let's do a group study and kind of like community consensus here, because there really isn't one. You have lots of different authors that have different takes, and some authors that I found, like one of the reasons why I like the Taking Up the Runes book, that I think I've mentioned pretty much every time now, is because she actually incorporates different ideas from other authors as well.
Yeah.
But even those, they vary, and there's no one like in tarot, we kind of have like the Golden Dawn tradition, right? Which is like the Thoth and the Waite-Smith and all of that. They kind of all come out of that tradition.
Yeah.
There's sort of that, but we're talking, you know, many years ago, and so the resources just aren't there like they are from, you know, say the 1800s, and so there really isn't a like hard and fast, here's the rule book for it type of thing. But I think that over the years they've kind of developed into their own, you know, kind of basic understanding. Like we talked about, there is kind of a base, but there's so many more levels to it that you can just dive in and out of. So that's probably not terribly helpful, but
I have heard, I think it's Erith Hagar or something, in one of the recent videos of his that I watched, he talked about how a lot of the meanings as we take them today have been extracted through various ways of looking at, I think, the Poetic Edda and the Havamal. Okay, thank goodness. So they've tried to extract what they could about what these runes may have originally meant from those types of sources, but it's all interpretation. It's just like interpreting any other ancient text or older text. It's like you're going, okay, they've obviously tried to embed the knowledge of the runes in this as part of their oral tradition or their wisdom tradition, but trying to extract that and go, this is what it was really intended to mean, is a lot trickier. And from what Erith has said, it sounds like some scholars are more confident about what the meanings might have been than others. Like one of the ones that came through this past week that seems like there's a lot more unknowns around is Perthro, where there's like a lot of like unknowns. There's a lot of guesswork involved on that one. And I think this is why I feel more empowered to use the texts and the resources as a jumping off point and then sort of form my own opinion around it and what I think resonates as far as the meaning goes. Just because it's clear that that's what everybody's been doing. They're just trying to do it from as educated a place as possible. So I'm going to go to them first because I'm too lazy to do all that research.
Right.
And then I'm going to add my own stuff to it.
Yeah. I think that's the best kind of way to take it, because there is no real, I mean, we're talking about systems that were used a long time ago, and some of the stuff that was just a part of their daily life is not a part of our daily life. I mean, you take like the first rune, hail. Hail to us has a totally different meaning than it did to them. Because
Absolutely.
for us, we're like, oh man, I hope that doesn't like break a window in my car, right?
Yeah. It's a lot different than like the total devastation of your family's crops and livelihood in the next cycle or whatever, you know?
So I think that, you know, like anything, the meanings are going to change, and it's going to change based on, you know, where you are in time in the world and all of that. And some of the stuff that I kind of feel like we have to fill in the blanks. We have to let it evolve, because otherwise I don't know that it would be a lot of good to us, because hail to me does not mean the devastation of my entire livelihood.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
it very well could have for them. So
Yeah. Totally agree. Asilian says, and a lot of the historical sources, especially the poems, are later rune sets, not Elder Futhark. Plus, many of the old, often oral sources were highly Christianized as history progressed. Totally agree. This is the other thing we've encountered. Is like there's a loss in a lot of ways of the pantheistic associations of the runes. If you're like a lot of the deeper meanings, the stories of some of the gods are a lot harder to unpack, I think, than others. And Asilian also says, also on some level, you have to interpret things as they have meaning to you, or it won't be applicable to our current lives. Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. So why don't we do a recap of the runes we covered this past week, 2 weeks? Time is flying. I actually have my rune cards for reference instead of the book this time. Woo!
Nice.
Excuse me. So we started off with a doozy. We started off with Hagalaz.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other known names for this one that you've encountered that you know of?
Not for that one. I think it's pretty consistently Hagalaz. The only thing I did find that an inconsistency was in some books. It was this whole et was Hemdall's et, and in some it was Hagel's. Oh. Or no, I should have looked first.
No, that's okay, but I've encountered something similar, so I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like, some of the means, which I'm wondering, yeah, it's Hagel's, but which I'm wondering if that is because the first rune is Hagalaz.
Yeah, just like the first rune, which is phrase Ayet. Mm-hmm. The first rune is I'm just gonna say Futhark. Wow, Fehu. I need more coffee. The first rune is Fehu, right? So so there's not a direct association, but in the third et, we're looking at Tyr's et, and it is Tyr as the first rune. So interesting.
Yeah. And some of this, like one of the things I've been trying to wrap my brain around is, I don't know if it's because it's my tarot background, but I want a structure. I want somebody to tell me, like, the Fool's Journey. I'm trying to figure out, like, where do these runes fit? Because in some of them in my research, I'm like, well, that feels like it would be a better rune following this rune or something like that. But I don't know that there is one.
I know, I've encountered the same thing. I do think that one thing I encountered, which I guess, well, I'll talk about when I get there, but there is a little bit of a balance within each 8 in a way. But I haven't found yet a really, like, I would just love a timeline with runes inserted in the timeline, like exactly in the order that they exist. That would be so neat and tidy for me personally.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what my brain's looking for. It's like, where's the structure? Where's the logic? My brain is trying to fit. Okay, this follows this. Like, right, we know, like, the magician follows the fool, and the high priestess follows the magician. And I think that's where my brain's trying to, like,
that's where my brain goes too.
Yeah, it's trying to, like, put it in a box, and I'm just not sure that's gonna work.
But I think I need, like, a children's story that incorporates the runes in order. And if that doesn't already exist, if that exists and you guys know about it, somebody better tell me. But if it doesn't exist, somebody should write that. I mean, I'm not volunteering, but somebody should write that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you do with Hagalaz?
So I think that one initially, and I'm sorry if I look down because I have notes, but initially it stands for hail, and it's kind of the rune of delay and disruption. And I wish I would have wrote it down, because each et has kind of a structure to it, so to speak, which that's where my brain was trying to, like, the first et was kind of like all of the big world creation. And I know the third is, like, all about like everyday human life. And now I'm totally blanking on the second one. I think it's like more of the natural world, I think.
It might be, because it's all like big natural energies.
Right. It's all like we have hail, we have winter, we have elements, and we have natural things. So in trying to keep that in mind, I think that this one really kind of signifies like a disruption in the nature, the changing nature of things. And I think we like change and transition to be kind of a tying thread throughout this whole et. And so starting out with hail is just like, you know, we're just throwing you into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
So figure out how to swim, and then we'll show you where this, you know, how to actually do it properly.
Yeah.
One of the things that in the group that Jennifer had said was that it was also about a clearing out and create space that we can fill with growth. That wasn't something I came across in my text, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think this one, it really is just, it seems to be like a life or death type of thing, because again, like we were talking about, hail for them could literally be a life or death thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like too, one of the things that came through for me is thinking about when I'd actually watched hail happen. It's like if I was actually looking out on a field as an example and I was watching that happen, like as it is today, I'd like if hail happens, everybody just kind of stops. There's this moment of like time almost freezes for a moment because you have to wait for it to end. You can't do anything. You can't go out and fix anything. You can't protect anything. You just have to like accept that this is what's happening and just wait to see what the damage is going to be after. I mean, any other kind of big, huge, devastating storm is the same sort of experience, right? It's like all you can do is take shelter and then assess the damage. And I think that's one of the things that came through was this sort of awe-inspiring, overwhelming feeling of like, it's just happening. That you can't
control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Astillian said in the chat, which I think is really useful. I have in the notes, first is creation, humanity. Second is change and conflict. And the third is a resolution, divinity. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think mine in the resources I had, the first and the third were swapped, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So like the first was divinity. It was all the god cards. We had Odin and Thor and all of that. And then the third is more about the humanity. So that's really interesting. And that there were, you know, different resources. So it's like,
yeah, this is the thing with them not agreeing, right?
Yeah. Everywhere you go, it's something different. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And I'm sure there's a whole like tie between the humanity and the divinity. And then you put that change conflict in the middle. That's probably an interesting concept all on its own. Just how
I definitely agree that the set has a lot of change and conflict in it, though.
It does, for sure. Yeah.
Auguries and Signals says this et has that though. The first 3 destructive runes start with ice and the et ends with the sun. There's a kind of progression there. Totally agree. This was actually one of the things that I stumbled on in my research this last couple weeks too. So that is our Hagalaz. Oh, and Nina has on her card. These are the rune spiral cards again, guys. If we haven't mentioned it this time, these are on Make Playing cards, and you can also order the guidebook, the Rune Spirals guidebook from Lulu. I think it's Lulu, right?
Lulu, yeah.
And she has here the goddess Hel in this card, and there's something here about her face being like half life and half death or something. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, Hel she's the daughter of Loki, and she's half dead, half alive. So you really get that sense of that life and death within this rune. And also one of the things that I came across was the higher self and the shadow self.
Oh,
you can see that represented in the, you know, living side of her face and the dead side of her face. Like she's supposed to be really, really beautiful on one side and really, really horrible on the other.
Gotcha. And Joanne says Hagalaz is a reminder to stand strong in the face of adversity. That's really good. I like that. So we go from hail, and then what's up next? It's Nauthiz, right?
Nauthiz, yeah.
So this one was one of the ones that definitely I came away with a much different meaning. And I knew that going in. I think I talked about that last live stream, was like, I think this one's going to shift for me a bit because I was feeling a lot of different sources on this one. But yeah, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, we had like originally, a lot of people say it's like need or necessity. One of the terms that a lot of people kind of stuck with is the idea of need fire, which is like the things that you need kind of on a like soul level. It's not like I need a new car. I need a new, I need a new pair of shoes. It's like I need this to be, fulfilled and a functioning human being. I found that was kind of the deeper level that really came out of that in terms of my study with that particular rune.
One of the things that came through for me for this one was friction, because one of the ideas of this is that you're creating a fire. This rune is supposed to represent, I'm doing it the wrong direction because I'm reversed. I can't figure it out. Anyway, what was the slanted piece that way? The slanted piece is supposed to represent like a bow I forget what you call it, but the bow thing that you would use to create fire on sticks. You'd rub 2 sticks together essentially. And one of the pieces that came away for me from studying this one was the idea that you can't have the idea that friction creates you need the friction to get what you need in a way, like almost like you have to move through that friction. Because one of the things that I found I kept encountering again and again in my readings was that this is not an easy rune. And I always thought this one was just like, okay, focus on what you need, not what you want. Super simple, right? No big deal. But like actually it's almost like being confronted with life circumstances, that's the friction that like force you to focus on what you need. So it's and again, like you said, it's not the simple little kind of needs, but like the hi, I need to like survive this moment. I need to focus on what really matters. So that was the big takeaway for me was friction. And I added that into my notes, this idea that friction breeds necessity, that it's through the friction moments that we act. Yes, Joanne just said it, perseverance, necessity is the mother of invention. Yeah, like that idea that you're faced with this difficult thing and you have to come through it. Oh, that was the thing I put in the group, I think. Something about, I think this was the one that made me think of like being tested in a way, like moving through like a Hunger Games kind of moment, or what was the other one that came to mind? So the game Survivor, right? Being thrust into a situation where you have to survive. That's what it kept making me think of. Really potent, this one.
It is. I had kind of another note on more of the sort of mundane level too, was like the things that you need aren't always the easiest things to obtain.
Yes.
So sometimes it takes, you know, and that was again the same with you, the friction and the fire is that, you know, if you have to kind of, you have to work at it. If it's worth, what do they say? If it's worth having, you know,
and it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the sort of more on the mundane level of things, I suppose. But
yeah, Anne says found somewhere short-term pain for long-term gain. Yeah, totally agree. That definitely feels like this rune to me. And Kristen says growth through struggle. Yeah, totally agree. And I'd always taken this as a just like a gentle reminder to focus. And I don't think this is a gentle reminder kind of card.
No, I think that slap you upside the head.
Yeah, 2x4 moments here for sure. Yeah, absolutely agree. I don't know if there's anything else I had here. No. Yeah. I also wrote down a good foundation is required. Like you need to focus on the very basic root of what it is, of your basic human needs. Yeah.
Cool. One other thing that I came across in a couple of references was that it can also hint to being in a difficult or restrictive situation where you can't move. I'm not really sure how that ties into the friction and the fire, other than trying to struggle against, you know, a situation that you feel restricted in creates that friction.
I could see that. Like if somebody's like bound, for example, there's friction just from trying to loosen yourself from the ropes, right? You could picture it that way. So I could see that. I see that stuckness more in the next rune, honestly.
I do
too. Yeah.
But it was there, so I thought I'd note it because I did come across in a couple different references. But like you, I feel like that really speaks to the next rune for sure.
So that, speaking of which, brings us to Isa. Well, I just threw the card at myself.
Isa, yeah. So that one is ice, basically. And the keyword that I came across most often was like inertia, stasis, and just kind of being held in one place. And so I thought in the group, I guess Sky Dancer had said that to kind of compare it to like ice on a tree. It can be beautiful, but it also can be extremely restrictive. So the tree can't bloom, the tree can't grow. It's just stuck in this sort of ice cavern. And I thought that was just an interesting kind of visual reference for it.
I love that mental image because if you think about anything that's trying to expand into ice, it can't. It's like, yeah, I love that idea. One of the things, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying the other thing that also came across was that to remember that it's temporary because ice melts. I mean, yeah, eventually, even the ice age melted eventually.
Eventually it melts.
Eventually. But that it was like it does melt. So eventually there's this opportunity to move on.
Yeah. Kristen says Isa reminds me of the Hanged Man. Yeah, I would agree. There's a bit of that in there for sure. And interestingly, one of the things that came through for me in my study, and I think I wrote about this in the group, was the concept of not just literal ice, but also the concept of winter and the ways that our lifestyle changes in a wintering time, right? Particularly if we look back to when there was, not artificial light and electricity and this kinds of things, the way that we would essentially hibernate, the ways that we would turn inward. And I naturally tend to move with that cycle in my personal life as well. I find that in the winter, I do a lot more introspection work. I do a lot more of my personal growth work because there's less external stuff to focus on. And so I think that's a cool additional layer to this rune, is this idea of what it's like to be in a winter stage. Like, what can you do? How can you mine the growth or the learning from this particular time when you can't really make progress? You can't move forward.
Yeah. One of the things that I found that was really interesting was that it can represent sort of absolute stillness too, because if you've ever been in anywhere that's completely iced over, it's very quiet, it's very still. But it's also a reminder that if you stay in that state too long, it becomes like a prison.
Yeah. Yeah, and that silence can be oppressive. It can be really beautiful and inspiring, or it can be very, very oppressive and lonely, and it can make you feel isolated. There's a card in a tarot deck actually that spells isolated, ICE-olated, and it is that concept of being like walled off, shut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Oh, Joanne says water equals emotions. Perhaps this indicates emotional rigidity. That's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
And Anne says, found somewhere, winter of spiritual life is upon us. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I know, Raven. So the first 3 runes, in my opinion, are a serious butt kicking. Anybody else? Anyone? Yeah. Serious butt kicking in the first 3 runes of this hand. I'm like, can we have a breather? So who's up next? Do we have Yura?
Yura.
Yeah.
And then Yura is like that. That's kind of the, okay, you made it through the butt kicking, so here's your reward. So yeah, it's that's the one that it ties into harvest and really when things, here I have a note that says, coming after the 3 harsh wintry staves, it conveys a sense of relief and a return to life. So I thought that was really interesting.
I love that.
So I think it's really just one that kind of speaks to the cycle of life, especially like you can see in Nina's card, the way it's depicted. You kind of get that, wheel of the year, the kind of turning of the seasons, which I think kind of just reminds us that after the ice thaws, like things move on. So I think
everything's going to keep rolling forward. I think that's a helpful message when you've been through the last 3 runes. Like, okay, it's okay. Like you said, the ice will always thaw. Like, we will make progress forward. This one's a really interesting rune to me because I feel like it has a lot of big energy. We see double Kenaz here, which is interesting. We have that sort of, and somebody in the group, I can't remember, I don't know if you have it in your notes, had said something about giving, receiving energy here.
Yeah, Sky Dancer had talked about it being kind of like 2 mouths. So they're like, one's giving, one's receiving. So it has this give and take, this ebb and flow, which, yeah, I noted that too, because I thought that was really interesting.
I thought that was really cool. And I wrote down community versus individual. So one of the things that came through for me is that sort of big picture thinking, looking after the health of an overall community versus an individual's needs or wants. And I kind of feel like the last 3 cards would, to me anyways, prepare somebody for that idea of thinking about more than just how you are personally affected by things, but also how the ripple effect of events and how everyone's affected. Oh, Regina, I keep wanting to say Regina, it's not helping. Regina says, my son has this as a tattoo after a really rough year. Oh, that's interesting, because of course he went through that whole like cycle probably within that time. And Joanne says, reaping the rewards of perseverance, diligence, hard work, cause and effect. Yeah, exactly.
It's like you made it through the winter. So
yes, what goes around comes around.
The other thing that I thought was interesting was in the group, Jennifer had mentioned that it's the 12th rune in the Futhark set.
Oh.
So we think of 12 months in a year, 12 hours in each half of the day. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. So you get this like kind of half cycle thing.
I love that.
Tying in with the number 12. I thought that was really interesting. Although I think
that's
a little different calendar system than we did, but
Yeah, I think it's cool because I didn't even think about the number association or that it's halfway through the full set of runes. It's
Yeah.
kind of in that way, it almost seems like a breather. Like, okay, you've completed a full cycle, almost like a world kind of energy. Like you've completed a full cycle, and now it's time to embark on a new one. That I hadn't really thought of that energy with this rune.
Yeah, it's like the turn to the next phase or the next
Yeah,
thing.
I love that. Yeah,
Or,
Jennifer's had some great insights in the group. I've been really
yeah,
appreciating
like I
it.
have a lot of notes from Jennifer.
Yeah, she's got some good stuff in there.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah.
So, okay, so we have I was next.
Hmm.
Man, this was a doozy.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah.
So definitely tied into the tree of life and death, and transition and change. We have that's the tree that Odin hung himself on to sacrifice himself for the runes. There's like some big stuff going on in that card.
I felt like I did probably my most study this last couple weeks on this card. I feel like this is the one that I just had to keep diving deeper into because Yggdrasil, like the tree of life and death, the concept of the world tree, like that's big energy. It's a lot of big energy. And I think before I just had this, I think I had this written in my notes before as just basically protection, some growth. I mean, my keywords were really limited before, and
Yeah.
now there's so much more.
One of the things that I know is just like it's like this gateway to power. And if
Yeah.
you think of it in terms of like even the symbol is kind of like bringing power from above and below and coming together in the middle of the tree. It's just there's so much there. And then you could go into the roots and the branches and
Yeah.
that.
There's a bit here about like as above, so below, like we have on our Tarot Magician. The idea for me of like potential is definitely here. And some of the primary keywords that stood out to me during my study was life, death, initiation, and progress. Those were the 4 keywords I added to my notes from before. And so I feel like this is the kind of connection to source in a way, almost like your connection to upper realms, your connection to your subconscious, the lower realms. I almost feel like there's this like opportunity for self-exploration in this rune, especially when we think of Odin's story and hanging from the tree and the sacrifice needed to gain that wisdom, right? And that access to wisdom. Yeah.
One of the things that I had noted that I can't remember which resource, but it was there was some note about the karmic cycles. So if you think about the tree and the coming out through the roots, through the trunk to the branches, and then out and then back around again, and you have this like cycling of karmic energy. And that again, that life and death, maybe that's where the karmic energy comes in, that life and death of going around and having this link between the worlds.
Yeah. One of the other visuals that popped into my head working with this rune, this is super geeky, and I mentioned this in the group. I love the movie Avatar. It's like, love that movie. And there is the Tree of Souls in the Avatar movie, and this concept that you can kind of tap into ancient wisdom, ancestor wisdom. Essentially, it feels like an Akashic record kind of vibe. And this makes me think of that, this idea of like accessing this deeper, greater knowledge, this greater wisdom, this like a storage of wisdom over time, like I would see at the Akasha. Stuff like that. I thought that was a really potent mental image for me when I'm thinking about a tree, and something that will stick to me is what does this rune stand for? That was one of the big ones that popped in, and now I can't shake, which I'm cool with. I'm cool with it.
Yeah, that works. Yeah. One of the things that was interesting is that, and following the which we'll see here in the next rune, is there's this link between the tree and the well when you talk about Odin's story. So he's hanging from the tree, diving into the well to pull up the runes. And that kind of, there was a tie there, an aha moment tie there for me with the next rune too, which kind of feels like that bringing it all up to the surface.
Totally. Anne says, thought this was interesting. Relating symbol to energy running vertically up from root chakra to crown chakra bring cosmic consciousness. I totally get where you're going with that. If you're familiar with the chakra system as a form of the energy body, that makes perfect sense to me, because really you're drawing the energy upward and then it's releasing into the universe, and then there's a trickle down effect, kind of like a fountain, right? And that makes me think of the visual that Dawn Michelle mentioned, because you mentioned the thing about energy coming up and then back down, almost like it makes me think of those what do you call those things? that create a whole little ecosystem within them. It's like a terrarium or something where you have the plants that release and that. Is anybody following this?
Yeah, no,
that's what that makes me think of.
yeah.
So let's segue because you mentioned the tie into the next rune, and I'm excited. So that's Perthro, right?
Yeah, Perthro. And this is the one that nobody has any idea what it means.
Totally the unknown.
It's this really totally elusive rune that there's a lot of different associations. It's most commonly associated with like gaming or lock casting, kind of play and fun and that sort of thing. But then when I was reading deeper, if you turn it sideways, it becomes a well, or it empties or it fills.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's this idea of it could be the well at the bottom of the base of the tree that feeds the tree, but the tree also comes back into and feeds the well. So
Yeah.
that's part of that kind of cycle, although that isn't the main association that most people make, but that's one when I dug deeper, that's I found that there's some tie-in there.
Yeah, I think that's neat because the well was also where the sacrifice was made from Odin, right? So to me, when you think of like how I previously associated this rune was like the dice cup or the idea of a lot or chance or like fate, the unknown, these kinds of things, right? And so when you think about that from the perspective, I guess, of the concept of sacrifice, then it's like there's always a gamble. Like the risk, whenever you roll the dice, is that it's not going to come up in your favor. So I feel like there's an element of trust in the unknown or surrender to the unknown that works with the well idea as well as the rolling the dice gaming lot.
Yeah, kind of like you kind of have to sacrifice yourself to fate or destiny.
Yeah.
Things come out the way they're going to come out, and it kind of goes back to that, whether you're going to, fill up or empty out depends on how that lot is cast, I guess. So it kind of all ties back together in this kind of weird snaky kind of way.
I love how they sort of start to weave, though. You start to see that none of the runes really stand individually, which is interesting when we start to get into casting. I'm curious about that because they definitely, there's threads of the runes within each other. And you can start to see that it's more of a tapestry than like an individual skeins of yarn kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting.
Agree.
So it basically is just the rune that everybody seems to agree kind of is the mystery rune.
The mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to pop a link for the cards in the chat because Kristen was asking. So these are Nina's rune spiral cards, and this should take you, I believe, this takes you to the tin, but if you navigate from there to her shop, actually, I probably can just pop the other link in here real quick, just so that it's there. I'm just going to send you to the main shop, and you can see, because you can buy a tin for these as well as the cards themselves. So there, that's the make playing cards link for these, the rune spiral cards. I love these. And I love, now on here, she has the 3 Norns, right?
3 Norns, yeah, because that ties back into that idea of fate.
I really like this actually brought up a question that I raised in the group, which was really interesting to me because there's the blank rune, the weird rune was added in like later years, like fairly recently, as I understand it. And there was this idea of when you draw the blank rune, it represents that like, okay, no, draw again, or like the answer's unknown kind of thing. And what the question that raised for me when I found out that this basically is also similarly, to me, feels similar in the sense that it means kind of the unknown. You can't necessarily know the answer. You have to just have faith or trust or roll the dice or whatever. So to me, I felt like this kind of fills that need for me to have that unknown kind of answer. I feel like if I were doing a single rune draw and I got this, I'd be like, oh, I'm not meant to know. I'm meant to just see how it plays out.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to bring that up in the rune group and get other people's take on it. Yeah, the blank one was added by Ralph Bloom, right? Yeah. So I'm still kind of deciding what I think about that, but so far I haven't been working with a blank rune. But this, to me, this kind of scratches the itch, I guess, to have that kind of an answer. So, yeah.
That mystery, unknown,
Yeah.
I like that, the trust the universe kind of thing, trust the fates.
Yeah, totally. Cool. I think the next one's possibly no, not possibly. This one's my favorite out of the whole set.
A whole bunch.
I love Algies. Yeah, this one has me really excited.
I think this is the one that I think this is the one I actually struggled with the most because I kept just coming across this idea of protection.
Yeah.
And like kind of nothing more. And I'm like, there's got to be more.
Yeah. To me, the two things that stood out to me the most. So one of the things that Aerith talks about a lot in his video is that this rune, I've always seen this as antlers of the deer, which was that protection vibe.
Right.
But one of the things that Aerith talks about is that this also could be a figure who's standing feet together with arms up, raised up towards the sky. And that mental image to me was like, okay, so that to me speaks of looking to something greater than yourself, devotion, faith, that connection to spirit, that sort of thing. This sort of like, yeah, devotion was a word that kept popping into my head. Yeah. And going into this last couple of weeks, when we talked, I think when we talked about it last time, I got the mental image, and I can't shake it, and I'm okay with it, of the Patronus from Harry Potter. And this idea that you could conjure, or you could ask for this sort of spiritual protection. And I think that's kind of what, to me, when I think of protection, it's this idea of connection. It's protection based on connection to spirit, connection to deity and divinity. But that's how I formed my associations based on my own set of beliefs. I think there's lots of different ways to interpret it, but that's what stood out to me. And I think that's what I added to my notes. Yeah, devotion was the one key word I added.
Yeah, I felt like that was the one thread that kind of, in addition to that sort of protection, but it's, I guess in my first initial, I was like, oh, protection just in a general sense, but I think it more speaks to the idea of like divine protection, or like spirit guardians, or maybe what we might think of like as a guardian angel type of thing. So
yeah, that's kind of the vibe I was getting, especially because I think something I encountered literally compared to this rune to other protective runes in the deck, or in the freaking set. Deck is such an ingrained word in my brain. Specifically, if you contrast this against a card like, or against a rune like the Thurisaz, the Thorn rune, where you're taking an active part in defending and protecting yourself. This is a very passive kind of protection. You're not taking an aggressive or assertive action. You're actually pulling back and going, no, I'm going to give this over. I'm going to let source or spirit protect me, which is really interesting. Yeah, Joanne says reaching out to a spiritual higher power for protection. Anne says, Aerith, ? Humans trying to reach up to the gods. Aerith, is that a help? What is Aerith? Do you know?
That I don't.
Maybe I was talking about, maybe that was the guy I was talking to, the YouTube dude. That might be what you're asking. And yeah, there's a Aerith, Arath, Hagar, I think is the name. It's a YouTube channel that he has a lot of really good videos on the runes. Oh, interesting. Kristen says, I definitely feel more spiritually connected when I take that stance, as silly as that sounds. No, I don't think that sounds silly.
It kind of looks like yoga pose.
Yeah, exactly.
Which makes sense to me, as you know, when you take a look at it in terms of that kind of bigger picture energy, because as we found, all of the runes have like the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Yeah.
All in one rune.
Yeah. You have to look at, you don't have to, but it's helpful to look at that like everyday kind of energy, and then the bigger, like, huge concepts. And I feel like the runes of this they feel more focused on the big concepts than the prior rune, which to me felt more like daily, like some aspects of creation, but also of daily life. It felt more material in a way. This definitely feels more like we've taken a level up, and we're now looking at like big issues like life and death and fate and, winter and hail, and I don't know. Anyway, I love this rune. I think it's beautiful.
The progression that I forget, was it Cillian that mentioned it earlier, of the humanity and then the challenge and then divinity. You can see this as the transition of, particularly in this card, of kind of opening up. And actually that idea of awakening, I think, shows up quite a bit in the next if I remember correctly. But so I could see that transition of it is opening up to that idea of something larger than ourselves, where we start kind of in the macrocosm and move the microcosm, and then move the macrocosm through the X. That I could totally track that through this.
As soon as you said the thing about receiving, though, I just had this huge epiphany, because the shape of this rune is almost like a funnel drawing down energy from above. And as soon as I saw that mental image, like an arrow pointing down, so this is very much a pulling energy down from the upper world, or from spirit or divinity. That was a really cool mental image, once, because you just said something about opening up, and I was like, it's almost like you're catching energy from that higher realm. Oh, I love that. Okay, that was cool.
So that's why I was like, at first I'm like, oh, it's the elk, right? So I was struggling to make that sort of bigger picture, but now I think it makes more sense to me now when you look at it, because I had noticed that all of the runes have that bigger picture and the mundane. And so
Yeah.
the mundane, I get it. That's like, just protection in your everyday life and that kind of thing. And that's where my struggle was like, well, where's the big picture energy?
Yeah.
And that
Colleen
makes
says the same
sense.
pose as Gebo. So Gebo has the up and the down in equal balance, or the left and the right in equal balance, depending on how you want to look at it, where this is just focusing on that upward. So that's really cool. And Colleen says, I got a protective sanctuary. Yes, Good Journeys Tarot. That's where I got it, was from Aerith. Yeah, absolutely. That idea of hands upraised. I just love that. Once I got that image, it helped a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Because before that, I was just like, oh, it's the antlers.
Yeah, that's
Great
all I
for
ever saw it
protection.
as before.
Yeah.
Love that. So that brings us to the last one in this last which is Sowulo or Sowilo.
So yeah, I don't. That one I've seen both ways.
Same.
Yeah, so that's like the sun, the source, and if we're talking about it following the rune with the catching everything, pulling down, that's what we're pulling down from. We're pulling down from that higher source. So I think maybe that's kind of like, I'm starting to see the structure that I've been craving so much.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
if you put like Sowilo above, it's like a lightning bolt coming down.
And it's almost too like you could see it as like you've collected over here. You've collected all this spiritual energy, and then this could also be manifesting and spending that energy as well in a way. Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was just this is the one that it's like the kind of the big solar energy, I think, where if we're talking about these big energies in this whole that totally makes sense. And then one of the other things that I picked up on it is it can also be seen as like kind of the card or the energy of the light of truth, and kind of that symbol of enlightened consciousness. So this is kind of like you've made it through all the hard stuff, you've gone through all the changes, and you've pulled down the energy from above. So now you've reached this point of kind of enlightenment.
Yes.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I love that. And I also like the way that the sun, and I mean, a full sun in most landscape illuminates everything. Like it's very hard for there to be any lurking shadows in full sunlight anymore, right? Like you hit this point where everything is revealed. And I feel like when you've just been through what we've been through in this hail and ice and need fire and turns of the wheel and fate and life and death. I mean, big spirit, and then connection to spirit. Those are huge energies. Like you would come through that and you would feel, I think, to some degree, almost like raw and exposed, and in some ways maybe more vulnerable than you'd felt in the past, because you've been through all this and now you're aware of your own mortality and like all this kind of stuff. I feel like the sun is like, okay, it's all out now. It's all out in the open. What are you going to do with it? Kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I think that for me, this one, because that's that sort of, I mean, it does mean sun and source and all of that. It was hard to kind of disconnect that from the sun in tarot.
Yeah.
And to try, and I've kind of had that with a couple of cards. Like I keep wanting to like make my little tarot associations fit. And it's like, this is a different system and it has a different, its own thing going on. And
that can get you into trouble. Yeah.
So it's been, this is one because it's the sun. That's been one that's really been hard for me to kind of disconnect and set aside. I mean, you could pull, I think, some of that into your interpretation of the sun card of the tarot too.
Sure.
But it's been kind of, this is one of those that was challenging for me just because I had to kind of set aside my my tarot knowledge that wanted to just kind of leak all over it. And
mine leaked big time. Points out rightly so. The sun is also very destructive as it has no moderation. Yeah, absolutely. And the sun can, I mean, when we think about like forest fires at the heat peak of summer, and the ways that can cause an uncontrollable shift in your environment as well, we're still in that place of change. Joanne says force of will to survive. I think there's a lot of will here. I think there's a lot of solar plexus energy for those of you that work with chakras. But and I see that she's got somebody's chariot. Is this Frey's chariot? No, this is somebody else.
I think I don't have her card. Let me look. No, because Frey's I think is on the
cats, right? That was on a different card.
Yeah, that was on. I think that is.
Oh, this is Soul.
Soul, yeah.
That makes
the goddess of the sun.
logical. Oh, that brings up something that I think that came up in the group that was a super like, and it came up in the videos and research as well, is that the feminine was associated, the divine feminine was associated with the sun, which was like, I thought, what?
Yeah, that's totally different than how we normally see it, right?
I thought that was so trippy. There's some really cool thoughts about that in the group from, was it Jennifer again? It might have been.
I think so.
Yeah, something about how at that time there was a somebody explained it really well, and I can't remember the explanation about why the feminine was associated with the sun. Do you remember anything about that offhand?
I don't remember what the actual information was.
Something about, I think there's somebody said something, I think about,
it was something about I can't remember the sun, but something about the moon being tied to emotions, which they associated with warriors who went out and fought with passion. Because if you think of like Viking warriors, you know.
Yeah. And something about being more like men being perceived as more changeable. They were always going out and doing things and coming back, whereas the women were fixed in place at the hearth and the home. So they were seen as that stable
energy,
energy of the sun. Super interesting to me because, of course, I super associate the moon with feminine. Oh, here we go. Asilian says, sun was feminine because men went out a Viking and they were very emotional. Yes. But the women stayed home and were stable and reliable, like the sun who rose every day. Yes, yes, yes. Perfect. Thank you for recapping that for us. That's perfect.
Does totally make sense, but that's like totally opposite of my personal association. So that one took some work for me to go.
A little bit me too.
I don't know if I'd suddenly
pull this. Yeah, I don't think I'd suddenly pull this and think like divine feminine, but I get it, right? Like I get it. It's a cool association. And there was some interesting thoughts too about how this came up earlier in today's chat too, about how this is like resolving the runes from the earlier three, where we had hail and ice and need. Sun kind of comes in as the balm or the resolution.
The sun to melt the ice.
Yeah. So I liked that. I like that there you can see sort of a story arc of the second act for sure.
Yeah.
Love that.
That's what I'm always looking for. Like, where's the structure? I want the structure.
Yeah, totally. Some of my personal notes I had before the study that haven't really changed much. This is probably the one that changed the least for me through the study. I had wholeness, empowerment, and energy. Yeah, and then clarity. So I don't know how much of that is tarot leakage and how much of that is this specific rune, but I like the word source. Source to me, I think opens it up to a lot more interpretation.
Yeah, that was kind of my keyword. That I think that was the keyword that I started with in the initial my initial gathering of materials, and then moving through as I dug deeper, I still felt like some of my keywords have changed, which has been really interesting. But source really stayed the same because I think that it really encompasses the, all the different aspects that you can think of source. I mean, the sun gives us life, but it can also, like, if anybody's had a sunburn.
Exactly. Yeah, it can hurt you too.
It can hurt you too.
And the idea of like untamed source energy or untamed. Yeah, it's very different than. Yeah, I had to write that word down, source. I had to add it to my keywords. Okay, so we're going to be launching into our next group over the next 2 weeks of runes. And so let me grab, oh, nope, I had to grab a different set here. Here we go. Okay, so this one is Tears et?
Tear, yeah. I think it's pronounced tear.
Yeah.
So.
And for those of you who are in the Facebook group, you've created, Michelle, a downloadable, printable, study guide, right? For all three of the ets.
I'll also post it on my website. I don't think it's up there yet because I was running a little behind this morning, but I'll post it up there. So for anybody who's not in the Facebook group, you can still grab that too. And I think it's just Boho Tarot /Rune.
Let me just grab.
Let me see. Because I threw it up there as well, just in case for anybody who isn't in the Root /Rune study. Grab my one. Just in case, and it's just the basic preliminary information.
Thank you for doing that. That's been really helpful to have that to
So there's that, and then I'll get it up right after this. I'll add the third one. So all the other ones are there.
Yay! So we are going to be kicking off. I was just like distracted by the image. We're going to be kicking off the second et with Is it Tiwaz or Tewaz? Do you know?
I've heard it pronounced both. I think it's Taiwaz is how, because you think of tier Thai. I don't know actually. Well, where it comes from is that different pronunciations of it's either Thai or tiered that or tier what Tiwaz or Taiwaz.
Taiwaz. Tiwaz.
It's both the same name for the same god is what I'm trying to get at.
Got it.
Spit my words out. Same name for the same god.
Got it. Yeah, Kristen says I've heard Tiwaz. Okay.
Yeah, Tiwaz I think is how I've heard it pronounced most commonly. So, and he was the one-armed Norse god. So he was the god that basically gave up his arm in this whole, like there's this whole story. It's actually in the Norse mythology book too, about how for the wolf, the Fenrir wolf, which is one of Loki's children, they were trying to bind him up, and the gods, because they're all like kind of not always very nice beings, they were like, oh, we're gonna bind you up and you can, we'll let you out. And he was like, no, you won't let me out. I don't believe you. And Tyr was the god that said, all right, I'll put my hand in your mouth, and then that means that they'll bind you up with this special rope that they had the dwarves made. They were trying to bind him because he was like causing havoc or whatever. And so Tyr basically put his hand in the mouth and was like, okay, I'm trusting you. And the gods betrayed the wolf. And so Tyr said, go ahead, bite my hand off, because that was the deal. So he's the kind of seen as the god who provides over like law and justice. Because he was the one that was like, all right, I'm going to lose an arm, but I'll hold up my end of the bargain.
Trippy.
And they still bound the poor wolf anyway. So
I'm looking forward to studying this.
The wolf lost his life. It was just like a whole thing.
Not good times. I'm looking forward to studying this one because other than like just seeing this as very masculine energy, I don't have a lot of associations with it yet. I have a few keywords, but nothing that, I'm interested to see because I always get that sort of deeper layer during the study.
Yeah, that one really relates back in the initial study, kind of like to that idea of that warrior energy. And which is funny because Tyr's he's a war god. So it's not often that we think of war gods as being also a god of law and justice. So that was kind of an interesting kind of balance between the two.
Yeah, that makes sense. The gods have seen signs that, let me put this up. The gods had seen signs that the children of Loki would play a role in the end of the world, God. So that is one reason why they bound to outcast them. Right. Okay.
I believe that the wolf was key in Ragnarok.
Yeah. Okay. So after Tyr, we go to Berkana, which the only thing that I know about this one is that it's like kind of not source energy, but like mothering energy and like feminine energy and birth is what I've gotten from this one so far.
Yeah, that's kind of similar and more of like, I think the key word I put in the guide was like gestation. Yeah. Kind of like letting things grow. One of the key things that I picked up in my initial, which will be interesting to see how it kind of comes around as we dive deeper, was that it's basically a reminder that you have to nurture new growth with care. So if you're like a mother mothering a newborn baby, you have to like, you have to treat it carefully, this new growth. So if you think of it as coming through from, what we've learned so far in the eds, I don't know if they're meant to be in a, procession like that, but that idea of you've learned these new things, but you have to kind of care for them carefully.
Gently and carefully. Yeah. I love this. There's a lot of good things coming through in the group too. Fertility, the womb, new growth. Oh, and Julie mentions on the previous rune on Tyr, also related to sacrifice for your community, which works with the story you shared on that rune. That really, really works. Yeah. Cool. And this one is associated with the birch tree as well?
Yes. Okay. I think that's what it stands for, because the birch tree, let's see, I guess it's known as the birth rune too. So I guess it's often used in terms of childbirth.
Okay, that works. Makes sense. So then we come up to Awaz. This is one that when I was first trying to get familiar with just even what the runes were called when I was doing daily draws and stuff, this one always tripped me up. I don't know why, but I could never associate. I was having a hard time with the shape of the rune and associating it with the horse, but it's like a wild horse, right?
Yeah, I think like Nina's card, it's Odin's 8-legged horse, I think. I had trouble. This one throws me because there is another card, the radio has a horse on it too, and that kind of has thrown me. But
and I think it mixed me up because radio is about movement also,
right? And
so
this is I'm kind of interesting to see what comes out of kind of deeper study, because that's kind of what in my initial it's again about journeying, and it says the horse may represent any vehicle that enables you to shift from where you are to where you need to be. So I'm curious to see how that's different than the rune we've already covered.
Yeah, this is one of the things that always mess me up, because maybe this is tarot leakage again, because I think with Raido, I think chariot, which is hard to shake. And I think of it that way, and then I pull this, and this is about movement and journeys. I'm like, but wait. Oh, and so Julie Daniels says it's about the relationship with horse, not journey or riding. So that's interesting. Yeah, so this is one that I think I'm really excited to figure out what those deeper layers are and get that more refined understanding, because yeah, and my keywords are mostly around movement. There is some interesting things I have in my notes from whatever study I did way back when about something about a trusted ally or trust in general, because of course when you're riding a horse, there's an element of a shared, oh yeah, here, Acilian just said something that goes along with this. The symbiotic relationship between horse and rider. So you can see the image as two beings with their noses touching. Ooh, I love that. Okay, I can't wait to unpack that. And Kristen says, I think, don't quote me, but Raido is about the weight of the horse suffers, and this one is about the rider, maybe. Oh, interesting. So yeah, I'm excited to study this one, because that's one that I think I know I'm going to have new things like that whole two noses touching just totally hit. So that's
exciting. That. Yeah, this is definitely, I think, one of the ones that I'm most interested to dive into in this, because it's the one that I feel I have the least amount of understanding of.
It's interesting too, because Nina has the astrological association as Gemini, which again would speak more to that whole
the duality.
Yeah, interesting. So then we have Manaz,
which is humanity. Man is what it's,
yeah. Oh, so now I'm thinking, is this two Wunjos touching? Kind of
could be
interesting.
Yeah, so the initial kind of information that I gathered was it's really about humanity as a whole, but humanity's potential as well was like a key element in there. And then, it could also represent like this idea of shared community and kind of the evolution of our planetary consciousness, which is something we need right now.
Right? Big mood.
Yeah.
So that one's going to be fun to dig into. Yeah, I had just basically humankind and social and family responsibility were some things I had previously written down. I'm curious to see how that one evolves.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too.
One of my all-time faves, Lagus. Love this.
Water and emotion. That one, I kept coming across this whole idea of waters of life, which I think is really represented in Nina's card there too.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I've got like flow was the word that I always previously associated with this. So I'll be interested to see how that one shakes out. This one has got, flow, intuition, emotion, cleansing life. I mean, I see this very much as pure water element, but I have a feeling it's going to be about a lot more, because that's been the way that it's gone the whole way through.
Yeah, and this one I had a note that it was like it's about this profound journey inward to the depths of self as well, which I thought was really interesting little key phrase there.
That's interesting when we have like sort of this external, like humankind kind of concept, and then more of the internal. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited to see how that one shakes out. Okay. Yeah, Regina says this is feminine, but woe evokes masculine by shape. Oh, good point. Hadn't thought about that. And Kristen says makes me think of an oar.
But if you think of again back to the moon and the masculine in Norse mythology, that makes sense, right? Because they associated emotion with the masculine, not the feminine.
That's so interesting to me. And it does make a lot of logical sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And Kristen says diving into the subconscious for this one. Love that. Yeah, water baby. The other the other one was the other M. Yeah, MNS. Yeah. Cool. This one I've seen drawn a couple different ways, right? This is the one. Yeah, this is the one that shows up either drawn with or without its like legs. So sometimes it's just this diamond shape, and sometimes you'll see the Kenaz shape coming out the top and the bottom of it.
I haven't seen it on that depicted that way.
Yeah, I've got a bunch. I think a lot of my physical runes show this with so kind of like this Othala shape, but with that part on the top and the bottom. Yeah, I've seen it both ways. I kind of like the way this looks, but yeah. So this one is called either Ing or Ingus.
I think it's Ingus. It's connected to the god Ing, which is the god of fertility, I believe. Or it's associated with the goddess of fertility. So the notes that I have is really connecting back to like ancestral things with this card, that it's about fertility in, you know, in terms of inward and outward growth and what flows from your ancestry. And there was some mention of like if you look at it, if you connect them together, they kind of make like DNA.
Oh, interesting. Huh. Oh, that's cool.
So that's another one that I'm kind of like, I feel like there's maybe a connection, or at least in my mind, because we have fertility and then we had birth and like gestation in Berkana. So that's going to be interesting because they feel kind of closely tied, but I think one is more like, you know, kind of your more immediate in Berkana, and then when we have the Ingus, it's more, I don't know, global or ancestral.
Yeah, I'm not sure. My notes had seed ready to be planted was one of my notes from before. So I'm interested to see sort of how this one shakes out. Procreation, yeah, seed ready to be planted, starting something new. So it's almost like this feels a little bit like the potential perhaps of the ace. Potential of the ace, I think. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one shakes out.
I think this one is quite often associated too with like sexuality, fertility, and potency. And by that, it was also, I think, associated a lot with the masculine too.
Oh yeah, Kristen says ing seed like semen.
Yeah. Which to me, when I think of fertility, I guess I think more of the feminine side of fertility, not the masculine. So that if we look at that imbalance, you kind of have the feminine fertility in Berkana and then the masculine here in Ingus. So that's kind of interesting to see the balance each other out.
They do, and they also kind of, to me, seem like they might speak to two different stages, right? So this is earlier, whereas Berkana, you're sort of nurturing that new growth. This is like what I had here about seed ready to be planted. It kind of makes sense, right? Like, yeah, like that initial initiatory newness. Really cool. Asilian says kind of an incubation, the seed resting in the earth until it grows. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, definitely like that. And I have them in reverse order for some weird reason. Okay, so next up is Dagaz.
So the next two runes too, depending on what resources, sometimes they're swapped in terms of which I think like Nina has, I think Athala as the next rune, and then the majority of resources that I read had Dagaz for the other one. So I just thought that was interesting that sometimes, depending which books you're reading, they're flip-flopped in terms of which one ends the et.
Interesting. And I feel like that's familiar. Like maybe when I first made my rune notes a while ago, that it would be that way. So is there any sort of, you said which one is the most often that you've encountered?
The most often that I've encountered is Dagaz coming before Athala, or Athala, how you say it. But when I did my research, I actually feel like Nina had it right, that I feel like the other way around actually works better, because you have this idea of fertility, and we're going to kind of jump over, but Athala is about like ancestral home. Dagaz is more about awakening. So in my mind, it actually makes sense to swap the two, which I know Nina does in her book. But in a lot of the other books, I came across Dagaz first. So
yeah, I think my resources I obviously used before had Dagas first, but I could see how this would make such a beautiful ending rune in general.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, I guess we'll pick one.
I mean, either way, I don't know that there really is like a, they're not numbered like, like I keep trying to like force them into the major arcana, right? Like,
no.
you are number 1 and you are number 10 and you have to come before that. I don't know that it necessarily works like that, but it makes sense for either way. But this particular one, Dagas, is kind of, it's day, and this is the one that I was talking about. Kind of for me, got kind of jumbled up with source in Suilo, because they both kind of speak to light. But Suilo is like that big solar energy, whereas Dagas seems to be more about kind of the transitional zone between when light switches. So it, particularly talked about like the transitional zones of twilight and dawn, which was really interesting. So it can indicate this idea, or this period of transition, of moving from the dark into the light, or moving from the light into the dark.
That's interesting, because I think I had in my notes somewhere daybreak. So I must have at some point associated this with dawn.
Yeah.
And oh, hey, that's your name.
It's my card.
That's your card. But I like the idea of transition, like dark to light, light to dark. There's a thing to be probably explored here around liminal spaces in general, and what happens at the end of those liminal spaces. Like, what have we done during that time? So that's really, really interesting. And is this,
I think, makes it a really good one to actually end the et.
Yeah.
I can see, but this, I went with majority of what I found in my resources, and the majority of them have Dagas following Ingu, so that's what I went with. But I feel like that really is the end. Like, you've reached this place of enlightenment. Now you have to kind of bring it into your everyday life and manifest it in all those different transition zones. And
yeah. Oh man, okay.
I'm interested to dive more into, and to see kind of where it ends up in people's personal, kind of structure of, do they put it last or do they put it second to last? I'm kind of curious to see.
It just seems like such a good period at the end of the sentence in a way, but I guess, yeah, it may depend on what it, maybe it's that I need to study Othala more, but Othala is the last one.
And a lot of text.
Yeah.
And that one's kind of like about, ancestral home, which I could see too as an end, because it's like coming home at the end, right? So, I mean, it makes sense at the end as well, but I think it just looks at determines how you look at it, how you see the progression.
Yeah.
So that one kind of seems to be more about the literal and the symbolic sense of coming home, like what it feels like to come home within, your home, your space home, and your home within yourself.
It's interesting too, because the word that I've had for Othala is like legacy. So it's your ancestral home, but it's also what you're going to pay forward.
Right.
Whereas, so that kind of makes sense. If you think of legacy as the last card, or the last rune, I keep saying cards because I'm holding cards, but like if you think of it as the last rune, then there's something there to be said about that, right? Yeah, like yeah, like she says, or now what you are comfortable, now that you're comfortable with yourself, what do you pass on? Yeah, which I could totally see. And Liz says cycle of self-transformations. Yeah, exactly. So I'm interested to see. Yeah, I think after the study over the next couple of weeks, I'll have a firmer idea of what I think makes sense as far as the order. But yeah, I think you could definitely make a case for either for sure.
And I don't know if the order even matters. Like, I don't know if that's just me trying to make some sense out of it, because if you think of the way you use runes, right, it's you shake them up and you cast them, right? or you pick, just grab into the bag and you just grab out a handful and throw them on the table, right? It's not even like ordered as like, say, shuffling cards and then laying a spread.
Yeah, there's not like a linear way of looking at it.
I'm wondering if like that's just my tarot knowledge coming in, or my wanting to give it a structure and a lineage to follow.
Yeah.
And I know that that's one of the things that in all my research I've been trying to determine.
Yeah.
Is there a structure? There seems to be an agreed upon progression, but I haven't found any real resources as to why that is. Like, you can find lots of resources of why, say, strength comes at 8 or strength comes at 11.
Yeah, it's like a big part of the process. I think part of the reason, at least for me, that I want to understand the progression in that way or to understand the linear timeline is because I think story in general is such a powerful way to learn big systems like this. So part of me is like, if I can understand a progression, then there can be a bit of a story, and that can help me with the deeper understanding. Like with the major arcana, you have the Fool's Journey, and you could literally write a story from beginning to end, and being able to do that is like it just gives you access, I think, to more information. So I feel like that's what it is to me, is like if I can just nail, even if it's made up in my own head, if I can nail some kind of progression, then I can start to like find the different connections between different points on the timeline. So I think that's where the impulse comes from.
Yeah.
Clem and Hawthorne, I think there's a difference between order and progression. I would agree. And I think I have a general desire for order and anyway. So that's a personality thing.
I do too. A little bit OCD. I want everything to fit, and it's like
yes,
fit in this little box.
Which is hard with divinatory systems in general, right?
Yeah.
We did not match our backgrounds on purpose. Golly, that's we match, but they are very well aligned, actually.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, hi, butterfly.
Hello.
So that basically wraps up so that's our last et.
Right. Yes. The last one.
Oh boy.
I feel like there's going to be some big stuff in that one too.
Same. I feel like they're getting almost more nebulous in a way the further you go. Like in the beginning, it was like Fehu, as an example, was such a concrete concept to me. And then the further you get, the more like ethereal I feel like the runes get, and like the less easy it is to sort of grab hold of the meaning super easily. Asilian says it might be helpful to remember that the runes were an alphabet, so their order might be related there. That's a very, very good point. And Regina says something similar. Runes were an alphabet. Some alphabets definitely have an order. Others don't seem to. Maybe there isn't a formal order. Yeah.
That's what I want to dive into, and just, I don't know, I guess it's just my own nerdy brain, is like, I want to know what the order is. Somebody just tell me. Like, when I'm like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like, I want that.
Yes. Definitely. Before we wrap up, just a quick check-in. Have you acquired, I know you've got quite the acquisition of resources, and I think you froze, but have you acquired anything new in the last couple of weeks related to your rune study?
I haven't. I've been really good with my
really good.
Like just staying, and I think it's partially because I'm a little bit, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but I feel a little out of my depth with the runes. I mean, I've been reading tarot and for so long that that's comfortable. It's, you know, it's familiar, and the runes are so different that I feel like, because I think back to when I first started reading tarot, I had one deck. I know it's hard to imagine because
same.
But I had one deck for years, like 10, 15 years. And then like I finally got like one other one, because I think that was when like Amazon first came onto the scene. Like that's how long ago it was. I'm like, oh look, I could buy a tarot deck online.
No, I've got two.
Because I think if I had more than, like, I have my rune spiral cards, and I have my actual rune set, and I have my 3 books, and that's it. And I feel like if I got any more than that, well, I guess 4, because I have the Brian Froud's Runes of Elfland book, which isn't that just amazing? I love that.
My favorite thing. Common Hawthorne just said, I finally got my Froud book today. So this is all Dawn Michelle's fault, because she told me about this book right before we started our studies, I think. And I was like, I need that. It's out of print, but this is all by Brian Froud. And at the time you got it, you weren't even sure if it was going to have legit runes in it. It was just
I didn't know if it was like a real rune thing, or if it was like, you know, just like a storybook, you know, but I was like, it's so freaking cute. I don't even care. I want it anyway. And I think I got it on eBay, like relatively inexpensively. It was like $30 or something US.
Yeah, I think I spent about 25, maybe 25 US for it. I got mine off of Abe Books, but they're fairly easy to find, and they're not very expensive right now that I've seen. But like, this thing is so beautiful. First of all,
it's so
at the beginning of each rune, there's like a charm. It's like a little spoken, and these are the beginning part, and the stories that are written in this book are totally fictional, like associated with the land, Elfland, or the land of fairy. But the artwork is incredible. Like, that's the artwork for Kenaz.
That's just amazing.
Just freaking stunning. And then in every for every rune, there is a section called, there's a story that they've made up to go with that rune and what that rune kind of means, or their interpretation of what that rune means. And then there is a section called the gift here at the end. And the gift is where it seems to pull in, I think, more of the traditional meaning of that rune. The
actual rune, yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like you get a bit of both. And this has been amazing for me because this is sort of filling that desire for more visuals and more like story and things that make them more memorable. And I just, like, I love this for algae. This is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And this speaks a lot more to this particular story in this book, spoke more to the idea of passivity, of like not, of protection by not battling, like by choosing peace, by choosing calm. And I just, anyways, it's been really fun. So if you get a hold of this one, I think it's well worth it. I wouldn't recommend this as like a serious study resource. I would recommend it as a inspirational resource.
Mm-hmm.
Like something to just bring in a different aspect. But I've been very excited. Once mine came in, I've been looking up the runes in it every single time, and it's given me some little tidbits or ways of looking at things differently, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Julie just said, I thought it was amazing that Brian painted the pictures years before he found someone who could write the story. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I haven't gotten anything else. I've been good because I'm trying not to overwhelm myself.
Yeah, that's probably good. Yeah. It's already overwhelming enough, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, like I think back, like if I had all of this over here when I first started reading tarot, I don't know that I would have stuck with it. It
would have been too much. I totally agree. I think learning something with just a little bit helpful. And I do have a few rune sets now, but like I feel like they're all the same. It's not like I'm interpreting different kinds of artwork or anything like that. It's like, oh, which one feels nice today and which one's most portable or whatever. Oh, and Deb Painted Owl says Heindel Tarot does incorporate runes into the majors. That's good to know. I don't have
that deck's on my wish list because of that. Yeah.
Oh, and Regina says, I have a Norse tarot with runes on the cards. And I think there's a deck in the works. I've seen pictures of it somewhere. I don't remember what it's called. It looks absolutely stunning, though. It looks like to be a new rune deck that's in the works somewhere. Really, really detailed, gorgeous artwork. And that's just a big tease because I can't even remember what it's called. But if I think of it, I'll post it in the rune group or in the comments here so you guys can check it out. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I'm excited to go into the last AIT and see how it goes. See what we can unpack. That'll be good. I have a feeling that, I feel there's going to be a lot of like little shifts and stuff as well. So that'll be good.
I'm excited to get to the actual casting part too, to actually because you can only study so much before you have to start putting it into practice too, because sometimes for me like that'll really kind of lock in some of my ideas and interpretations. And like I said, I think it really depends on context. So I'm really kind of curious to see how each rune plays in context of a reading, because I've never actually done a rune cast.
Yeah.
Never thrown them. Like I have them, they're here. I'm listening to until I know what I'm doing with them.
I've actually never cast any runes, but for probably now, I would say it's probably been about 6 to 8 months. I've been doing a daily draw. But again, that's not much different than studying them one by one, right? Like you're only looking at really the general meaning and how it might apply as in a general energy kind of way. You're not looking at how they interplay or how to answer maybe specific questions, things like that. I haven't really done any of that. And I have that one book, The Rune Reading Your Life, which I don't know that I fully recommend. I feel like it kind of goes its own way in too many places, but it does have a bit of a journaling aspect where it asks you to pull a rune a day and write about that, but then also do some specific kind of spreads and things, which is more familiar from a tarot perspective, is to put them in specific positions.
Right.
So I'm interested to see what casting feels like, and I'm really excited because that feels like a whole new world.
I feel like that's like I don't know. I like the tactile experience. And so I feel like that's going to be like, I don't know, just hearing the runes clank around. And I feel like it's going to be like a fun, really tactile experience.
Totally. I can't wait. Okay. Well, I think we can wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for being here.
there's been lots of great input in the chat. I really appreciate it. And if you are watching this back later and you have thoughts on any of the runes that we've shared from either last set of 8 or the upcoming set of 8, leave them down below so that people can kind of continue the conversation and help each other. Those are always really fun to go back and read. So I really appreciate everybody's input. And we don't have do we have a date set yet for the next one?
I think it's the.
It'll be.
Second, I can look here.
I've got it right here.
22nd.
Yes. August 22nd, Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, just like today. And we will see you where we will be wrapping up the last set of 8, the final set of 8, sharing our thoughts, and then we will introduce some casting thoughts, ideas.
I think we'll start working and moving into casting at that point.
I'm very excited.
Me too.
So thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out with us. I'm going to turn this thingy off and hit the button now, but I hope everybody has a really great rest of your day. Thank you again, Dasha. Bye.